Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to another studio vlog. Hopefully this week I do more than just paint myself to death. No, but there are a couple of things that I want to do other than just generally working on and working towards completing the painting series that I'm working on right now, which the first video in this sort of series project is up, and it probably is my last video, so I will link it above if you haven't seen that and want to know what on earth I'm talking about. But of course right now my main project is working on that series so that I can get it finished and out of the way and move on with my artistic life. But I do actually have a couple of new art supplies goodies, and I think actually there's a few things that are arriving today which also would work into a good part of this video, because I actually bought some more paint to expand my main custom watercolor palette, which is pretty exciting to me. It's not something that happens very frequently because my main watercolor palette is pretty built out as it is, but since I have been using it non-stop constantly every day for the last few weeks, I realized there were a couple of colors that I was just gravitating towards and mixing up a lot, and I thought it might be nice and useful if I had those colors almost basically already in the palette instead of having to mix it up all the time. You know, it's not the end of the world, but I just realized that I don't actually have very many browns and neutral tones in my main palette. So I'm not entirely sure what paint colors I ended up purchasing, because there were some ones, my main watercolor palette is almost entirely Daniel Smith colors, and I have one of those dot swatch, well, I've turned mine into a swatch sheet that I talk about a lot, and so I have literally all of the Daniel Smith paints swatched, so when I am looking to possibly add new colors to my watercolor palette, I literally just look at that sheet and it's labeled what I have and what I don't have, and then I can choose the colors that I might be interested in adding to my collection from there, which is extremely helpful. I have used that thing so much. It's literally how I ended up building my main watercolor palette. So that is also one of the reasons why I recommend one of those swatch charts so much. Daniel Smith was, as far as I know, the first sort of at least watercolor company that did those dot charts, but I'm pretty sure Winsor Newton does one now, and there might be a few other brands that have sort of followed suit. So really love when art companies do that, because that means you can get real swatches in your house to be able to check over color-wise, and of course when you're in the middle of a pandemic and need to order online all of the time, you can actually have swatches that are already with you that you can choose from without having to worry about in-store swatches. Because let's be real, digital swatches never look like the actual colors. But I think that's enough for me rambling about art supplies in this intro, and I guess let's see where the week takes us in terms of art-related activities. So I've got the next two drawings all finished and printed out, so 4 and 5. I'm actually almost completely done the 6th one as well. I was just fighting with a bit of a tree drawing, so I figured I would get all of the design elements on these two all mirrored and lined up and in the middle of the page, all of that stuff, although they printed pretty crooked, so I'm probably going to end up cutting the tops of these straight so that they can actually be lined up on the paper themselves. You can probably see, especially on this one, how it's cut off on the one side, and it's just, yeah, for some reason they didn't print too straight. But that's not the end of the world, because, you know, I'm having to redraw everything anyway, so as long as they go on the actual watercolor paper fine, then that's really what matters. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and start transferring the 4th one, which is Freak Show, which is of course the twins, so I've got 2 portraits to worry about for this one, but no building. Literally both of these, because they did not have, this one doesn't have a building at all, and this one is a pretty minimal entrance tent sort of situation. I did these both in a couple of hours, redrawing the thumbnails and getting them all lined out. So yeah, it's very nice to not have 70 windows to redraw. Alright, so here's what we are working with. I've got everything taped in place, hopefully. So I did trim the top of the page, across the top of the design, because I presumably am hoping that that is actually straight. I have been actually measuring out 1/2 inch marks all along the actual paper to do the taping, just so that the borders are all even, and I was also using that normally to line the edge of the page up on. So I basically measured the medium distance between the edge of the page and the top of the design, measured that out, and then taped that all here, which is why there's this weird gap. And then I have taped the rest of it down with the transfer paper underneath so that it doesn't move around. And yeah, now it's all good and ready to go for transferring. We now interrupt this regularly scheduled studio vlog with a bit of a paint haul. Yes, my new watercolors just came in for my main watercolor palette, and I wanted to show you them and get them in pans as soon as possible so that I can actually start using these for the next painting, like so they solidify in the pans a little bit. I probably could do a bit of pan maintenance on my palette in general, just filling up some colors, but I wanted to talk about the new ones that I'm adding to my collection. So the first one is the weirdest one to say. How on earth? Gothite brown ochre, something like that. We have burnt umber, which somehow I did not have already. Buff titanium, burnt sienna, and lunar blue. So these are all super neutral. This one is a little, it's blue clearly, but it's kind of a more neutral blue, which this is going to do wonders in messing up my palette organization. So we'll figure that out, but for now I'm going to start putting these in pans. Got my main palette refilled up here, and then the new pans are over here drying. I just didn't want to try and put such extremely fully wet pans into my palette. But I'm gonna go back to painting, drawing, whatever I was doing before I got distracted with new paint. You remember how at the beginning of this video I was going on about the wonders of the dot swatch chart sheets that you can buy from different watercolor companies? Well, I decided to take my own advice and pick up the Winsor & Newton one. Mostly I thought of this because I actually needed to buy another one of these. I needed a Mars Black when I was filling up my palette. I almost used the rest of the tube that I had, which might actually be a first for me, but the tubes that I have for all of my Winsor & Newton ones I think are 5 milliliters, so it kind of makes sense. It's significantly less paint. I was just thinking about, I'm pretty much an equal opportunist when it comes to watercolor. It just so happens that most of my main palette are Daniel Smith colors, but I do still use a decent amount of Winsor & Newton ones as well, and they're also fairly reasonably easy for me to get here in Canada. There are a few other watercolor brands other than Daniel Smith and Winsor & Newton that it's easy to get here, but I would say that generally those are the two, at least for professional watercolors, probably the easiest. So this watercolor dot chart is 109 colors, and I figured I would swatch it on camera for anyone that is interested in seeing the range of Winsor & Newton paint. I also like how this one is definitely laid out as it's meant to be a swatch chart, which I feel like a lot of people, that's what they're using them for. I'm pretty sure that Daniel Smith sort of brands it as like, yes, it could be a swatch chart, but it's more like a tester sheet that you could technically use for paintings, considering the amount of paint that they give you on that thing. Same for this, I'm sure that's sort of like in their branding for it, but I do appreciate the easily laid out swatchability of the areas given. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And then I guess sort of see if there's any other colors I want to add to my collection. And here's the finished swatch sheet. I did also already go through and mark the colors that I actually have already in my collection. Also added the colors that I just ordered. So you know, nothing too crazy. I just ordered a French ultramarine and the brown madder because that looked like a really cool and unique color, and French ultramarine is something that I've been meaning to add to my collection because the Daniel Smith one is kind of just disappointing. So that really typical bright punchy French ultramarine I've been looking out for, and that one looks beautiful. And those are supposed to be here tomorrow so I can continue this paint expansion that's going on at the moment for my palette. But something that was kind of random is I actually have a color. Where did I put that thing? Yeah, when I was going through and checking my swatch sheet with these colors, I actually realized there was one that was not on this, and it just, I was like, I thought I was losing my mind for a minute, and I thought that maybe they just renamed it because this is called Very Excitingly Dark Brown, if it would focus there. Yeah, dark brown, very exciting colors. So I thought they possibly renamed it, but it just looks like they got rid of it. I did kind of quick Google search it, and it does seem to be still available, but then it's not on this swatch sheet, so maybe they're gradually fading it out of the collection. I don't know, but that's a weird random tidbit of the day there. Alright, all of my paint pans are set up, even the ones that I just got yesterday, at least to the point that I feel like I probably could get them in the palette without too much wet paint getting everywhere. But what my plan is, because I did want to wait for these, because right now I have like these two little sad ones here that I've never really truly officially initiated into the palette. Like, they're not even part of my swatch chart thing that I'm constantly using as like a cheat sheet because I can never remember where any of the colors that I want are. You know, watercolor is one of those hard things where like all of these colors look like they're the same and they're actually very much not. So those two have never been like officially initiated on this, and what I realized is that I have basically all neutral colors that I added and blues. So it's either neutral colors or blues, which is story of my life. So what I'm going to do is I think turn this row into a bit of like a mini portrait palette. I don't want to mess with any of the rest of it. I obviously could if I really wanted them in like actual color order, but I'm pretty okay with this idea, and obviously in the future if I mess around with things more and stuff, I can obviously create a swatch sheet, but for now that is the plan. I decided that even though the majority of the colors were going to be out of color order in regards to the rest of the palette, I decided that I did want to try and keep the brands together and then also keep those paints in color order, which is why you see me looking at my swatch sheet so I know what order they're actually supposed to be in. Although I did actually end up changing this from what you're about to see because I decided to put the Van Gogh Naples yellow red closer to me. Literally what you're seeing me like use as a swatch on the side is almost like reverse of how I typically have it laying beside me when I'm working. I would normally have the like reds and skin tones closer to me, but it was just easier to swatch them this way. So that is what I changed. So the blues go the Winsor Newton blues to the Daniel Smith lunar blue, and then the neutrals are all the Daniel Smith colors, and then the one Winsor Newton color, and then the Naples yellow red. And then of course, since all of the palette additions and maintenance were finished, I went back to working on this painting with absolutely no explanation or transition to be had. So sorry for the weird jump there. I feel like this footage is pretty self-explanatory though, so I guess I will let you all enjoy seeing the remaining process of this piece. the finished fourth one. This is just such a cool looking one. The circus theme is a lot of fun to paint, and I have actually also already, I've spent the entire day redrawing the straight lines on the fifth one, and so I actually think I'm just gonna go in and start painting this one because most of these actual lines I don't want to be super stark, so I think just painting them up is going to be enough definition for them, and then obviously if I decide otherwise I can outline it after it's being painted. So yeah, that's the plan. On to the next one. Here's how the fifth piece is shaping up so far. I was trying to really figure out the precise like tone of the gold in the like key area and also like the value level, because there's a bit of a range that I could play with. Obviously I could bump the contrast between the like raised bits here, and just, you know, there was a little bit to play around with. So this side is mostly, I think, done, at least in the like tonal inset area, so I'm gonna obviously do the same on this side, but I really want to finish this video here so I can start editing it and presumably post it hopefully tomorrow. So unfortunately I'm gonna have to leave you sort of hanging for this one, but you know, I'm sure the remainder process of me finishing this up will be in a future video, although I think next week I'm gonna start pouring some more palettes because I need to restock some of those, so I guess we will see what happens. That's going to be where I end this studio vlog, so thank you so much for joining me this week, and I will see you in my next video.